Next one, going to the ACC. We have Clemson on the road taking on Syracuse. Syracuse at home. Looking like 6.5, 7 for Clemson. Been moving a little bit, kind of bouncing back and forth. Total 52.5. Early game here. I think they still play in the Carrier Dome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Carrier Dome. I was actually looking at some of the past games, and Clemson has pretty much dominated Syracuse over the years, but they did have that one game, I think it was 2017, where they lost in the Carrier Dome. But it's still like a tricky spot to play. And it really comes down to what you think of Clemson at this point, coming off that tough loss, of course, to Florida State, maybe a game they probably could have won. But um, do you have faith in Clemson to cover the number?
No, so I actually lean Syracuse here. I think this is going to be a close game. Uh, Obviously, with Clemson, there's a huge motivation factor going in. They've got a chip on their shoulder. Uh, they're looking to avoid the huge preseason expectations. They're looking to avoid starting 0-3. They arguably should have won that game against Florida State, given they made that kick. The whole kicker disaster thing happened, and
Mm-hmm.
um, but they couldn't finish drives. And obviously, there were it was more than just a kicker issue, but so they're definitely going to go in to Syracuse with the motivation factor that they've got that on their side. But Schrader has looked good on the flip side. I do worry about him getting pressured by Clemson's defense, but I still the number for me is the key. So Clemson took a little bit of money because the line moved. It was 6.5. That line
Mm-hmm.
moved to 7. And so you just said it just bounced back to it's bouncing back the other
Yeah,
way.
it seems like it's kind of going a little back and forth. Like at circa, it was 7, back to 6, or to 6, back to 7, 6.5. So it's just teeter tottering around the key number.
Okay, so yeah, so I like it at 7. I wouldn't play it at anything else, but I like the Syracuse plus 7. I think that's I mean, I think they can win outright. So I think there's money line potential there too, but my only hesitation is just that Clemson's motivation factor. So for me, it's one of two things, right? It's either they're motivated and they're going to finish the season strong, or they're at the point now where they're so deflated and they have nothing to play for, so they're just not going to show up at all. So that's my apprehension there is I just don't know what their mindset is at this point in the season.
I think that's a fair look because I typically like to use that narrative when a team is on the road, and they are, versus if they
Mhm.
were coming back home. Um, I just think it's tough to go from, big game to big game like that. And, now you take on a Syracuse team, all the way in New York, right? It's a distance for them, based on, some of the other schools they play that are closer proximity. And Garrett Schrader has looked pretty good on offense. He's kind of a dual threat guy. Um, I think it's safe to say he might be the better quarterback in this matchup head to head. So,
Oh yeah.
I mean, Klubnik. I mean, I don't know. I think he will have better days ahead of him, but he's yeah he's just not confident. I think is one of the issues I see with him. So I think at 7, I think that's a pretty good look, getting the points with Syracuse.
It's almost it that line actually surprised me. It's almost like it's too many points. And it kind of almost made me take a step back and think, okay, is there something that I'm missing here? Why is this line of because I kind of expected this to be at maybe like a 4.5 or a 5.5, something like that,
Mhm.
especially after, Clemson has been kind of exposed. But yeah, I mean, and on the road, like you said, so but I don't see any reason not to take Syracuse at 7. So I actually already played this at 7. So
Mhm. Yeah, and there's still Still a few sevens out there. You just kind of have to look around. Not as widely available, but yeah, look for a seven. I think that's a good look, and if I can find one, I'm probably gonna get there too because I think that's a good look. And yeah, Syracuse is gonna be pumped for this one. They're gonna be ready to go, and um, kind of curious what the money line's at too.
Mhm.
Getting to the last game here. Notre Dame taking on Duke. Of course, Notre Dame coming off that crazy game against Ohio State, and I'm still in shock that they had two consecutive plays to basically end the game with only 10 players.
Right.
Insane, and of course they literally run to the side of the defensive line where the missing player would have been. I mean, it's tough because I think that could have changed the outcome of the game. I think if that player is there, I don't know if he gets in. And if they stuff him, I think that would have been game. So crazy game, and now you have a turnaround, and you got to play Duke, and Duke's a good team. Duke beat Clemson, who we just talked about. Um, I think Duke is for real. I don't know if they're a team that is like going to make a run for the playoff and anything like that, but I think they are a talented team. So this spread is at 5.5, and the total's at 52.5, 51.5 at FanDuel. Do you think Notre Dame bounces back after that, or do you think that this is a pretty good spot for Duke?
So that's a great question. I've been back and forth on this. I think initially I thought this was a great spot for Notre Dame, but was that 5.5?
Yeah, 5.5, and I don't see it getting to 6 or anything like that. I think it's gonna maybe 6, but no way it goes over 6.
Yeah. Initial lean was Notre Dame. I think that they're still the better team, even though Elko is going to motivate. Duke's going to be motivated. They're going to come out. But then again, even with that Duke Clemson game, remember that was a weird game because Clemson arguably should have won that game. If they didn't have all that weird stuff happen in the red zone, and so it's one of those things where. But I do agree that Duke's a good team. So I do like the under here. I lean the under. If I had to pick a side, I at 5.5. I mean, I lean Notre Dame,
Mhm.
but I'm not overly confident. This week, I was just thinking about how weird this week is. I think there's such a high potential for upsets because you have all these teams. You've got Utah, you've got LSU, you've got Notre Dame, you've got Clemson that are all going on the road.
Mhm.
So, and a lot of these teams are coming off of close losses or close wins. So it's kind of an interesting week. I think it's kind of a tough week from a betting perspective because I think we could see some upsets here. So I'm not yeah, I mean, I lean under and Notre Dame, but this is admittedly the game that I've looked into the least, so I still need to dig into it a little bit more.
Mhm.
But, I think if I have a little more confidence, I'll play the under more so than the Notre Dame side, but I'm not opposed to the Notre Dame side if I can find some supporting information for that.
Yeah. I think for me, like, looking at this game, definitely looking at Notre Dame with the ball and, what they're gonna do with the ball, and of course, they're gonna try to run the ball with Esteem, and Duke on defense has been decent against the run. They haven't been great. Like, they're kind of middle of the pack, like 3.8 yards allowed per carry. So they're not exceptional, but they're also not, they're not allowing anything crazy like over 5 yards per carry. Um, it really comes down to, can Duke stop them in the red zone? Because I think if they do that, they definitely will cover this. And I think the under, which is a bet I like quite a bit, I think it's contingent on that too, because Notre Dame's going to move the ball. They're going to get long possessions, and I think Duke offensively too will have efficient drives with Riley Leonard. Just kind of comes down to what they do in the red zone. I don't see a lot of turnovers in this game as well. But I like the under because I do think the clock is going to be ticking quite a bit. Both teams kind of play slower, and
Mm.
52, 52 and a half, I think it's fair. Um, we could see some weather in this, correct?
Yeah, so as of now, the weather has backed off a little bit, but we did see and that's partly due to the fact that the system is moving a little bit to the north. So we're showing that it may not impact North Carolina as much as as originally thought. So now it's looking like Virginia northward is where the impacts are going to be, but that's still pretty low confidence. So it could, there's a slight chance, but again, I wouldn't count on it. It's the way, especially when you look at the FCS
Mm-hmm.
tab and you look at all those games, that's very telling of kind of where the the models think that the system is going to be. So I wouldn't count on it, but there is a chance. There's definitely still a chance that, which of course would help our under if that were the
Mm-hmm.
case.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna rely on that, but it would be nice. It's always nice to have a handicap for and
Mm.
under, weather aside, and then that can kind of be the added layer, and it's always a good sign to have that on your side.